country. You should be here standing with us.
At 4:12 p.m., Britain did not erupt. Starmer lit the fuse himself. The first flames did not rise from the streets, but Marquette. They rose from a single file leaked out of the Home Office. A file so explosive that within minutes it tore through social media newsroom desks and finally the pavements of 3 major British cities. By 4:13 p.m. London sirens were already colliding with the sound of thousands rushing onto Westminster Bridge. Manchester's Piccadilly Gardens shook under the weight of a crowd that seemed to materialize out of thin air. Birmingham Central District witnessed the same surge. Fast, coordinated, furious because the leak named a number no government ever wanted spoken aloud. 24 violent offenders, 24 high-risk detainees, 24 individuals flagged for repeat aggression, and all of them had been freed quietly, deliberately under a program signed directly by Prime Minister Keir Starmer. No minister stepped out to explain. No security chief held a briefing. Only CCTV footage filled the vacuum. A hooded man, newly released under the so-called secret amnesty pilot, walking calmly away from a stabbing outside a convenience shop. The victim still on the ground as he disappeared into the evening flow of pedestrians. The air thickened instantly. Rage spread faster than truth. And by 4:20 p.m., Britain's 3 largest cities were no longer reacting. They were convulsing. And by the time the full truth leaked, Britain had already crossed the line of no return. Long before the streets filled with sirens and smoke, the decision had already been signed quietly, discreetly, and far from the scrutiny of Parliament. The document carried an innocuous title, Secret Amnesty Pilot Phase 1. It appeared to be a routine administrative adjustment, a procedural measure meant to ease overcrowding pressures within high-risk migrant detention centers. But buried inside the final paragraph was the true detonator. Authorization to release 24 detainees marked as violent or repeat offender profiles. There was no parliamentary review, no independent oversight, not even a formal security briefing. Somewhere within the Home Office, clearance logs were altered with surgical precision. Risk classifications were downgraded from red to amber. Behavioral flags vanished from the internal server. A digital trail that once documented assaults, weapon possession, and failed rehabilitation assessments was overwritten in less than 7 minutes. Even experienced analysts later admitted it wasn't incompetence, it was intention. The rationale Starmer relied on was simple and politically convenient. A reduction in detainee numbers ahead of a crucial immigration policy summit. Fewer people in custody meant fewer awkward questions from international partners, and fewer awkward questions meant a cleaner narrative for the government to present. For several hours, the release went unnoticed, until the first CCTV clip surfaced. A man in a dark jacket steps out of a convenience shop near Camden. He turns his head once. How the 24 violent offenders were quietly released expression blank. Behind him, a woman collapses to the pavement, hands pressed to a deep wound in her abdomen. The man doesn't run. He drifts into the crowd as though nothing has happened. Viewers identified him within minutes. Detainee 11, one of the 24 men freed under the pilot scheme. The footage did not merely shock the public. It shattered the fragile belief that someone somewhere inside government was keeping them safe. And as the clip raced through phones across the country, the temperature on Britain's streets began to climb. The anger hadn't erupted yet, but the fuse was already burning. The first 48 hours after the leak did not resemble a crisis. They resembled a detonation. What began with a single stabbing in Camden spread across Britain like a chain reaction of fear, snapping into fury. By sunrise, emergency channels documented 9 separate knife attacks linked to the newly freed detainees. None were random. Each occurred near transport hubs, late-night shops, or migrant housing zones, locations already stretched thin by staff shortages and understaffed patrols. Nurses at St. Thomas's Hospital reported trauma cases arriving in intervals too regular to be coincidence. Then came the second wave. 4 women, all from different cities, reported sexual assaults within a 10-hour period. Each attacker matched the profiles of the detainees Starmer's amnesty program had quietly released. The silence from Downing Street grew heavier with every hour, but the true ignition point struck just after 3 p.m. in Birmingham when 2 men on electric scooters hurled petrol bombs at a police vehicle parked outside a migrant services office. Flames tore upward, licking the edges of nearby shopfronts as pedestrians screamed and ran. The officers inside barely escaped. Footage of the burning vehicle hit 1 million views in under 9 minutes. That was the moment the public snapped. Reports of isolated incidents no longer satisfied anyone. People no longer waited for statements or reassurances. They no longer believed them. And within minutes, the anger turned physical. London was the first to rupture. Westminster Bridge trembled under a surge of bodies. Tens of thousands moving as though pulled by a single gravitational force. Flags waved beneath the winter sky. Banners scrolled with shaking hands. Starmer, let them out. No more lies. We are done being sacrificed. Metropolitan Police attempted a containment line, but the crowd rolled over it like a tide. Officers were pushed back street by street until Parliament itself stood exposed, something unseen in modern British history. Manchester followed next. At Piccadilly Gardens, the air filled with the deafening pop of flares. Thick red smoke rose between concrete towers as protesters climbed barriers, chanting in unison. When police reinforcements arrived, they found the first unit already overwhelmed. One officer's radio captured the panic. "We're losing the line." Repeat, "losing the line." Then Birmingham erupted on Smallbrook Queensway. The crowd swelled past 30,000. A policeman attempting to retreat became trapped between two streams of demonstrators and was toppled within 7 seconds. Its alarm screaming into the pavement as fists pounded against its frame. 2 officers were dragged out and shielded by bystanders. Proof that the crowd's fury was directed not at police, but at those who had placed the police in this impossible situation. By 5:40 p.m., a staggering knife attacks, assaults, and firebombs ignite national fury. 106,000 people across 3 cities had taken to the streets. The country no longer resembled itself. It resembled an awakening in every direction. You could feel the same electric truth crackling through the air. This was not ideological outrage. This was not fringe anger. This was the mainstream breaking. Parents, veterans, retail workers, bus drivers, students, nurses still wearing their scrubs. Ordinary citizens who had endured rising bills, overcrowded services, and a decade of political denial. Now confronted with the revelation that the Prime Minister had freed 24 violent offenders behind closed doors. And at the center of every chant, every broken line, every surge through the streets, one sentiment towered above the rest. If the government won't protect us, we will protect ourselves. At 6:02 p.m., the 3 cities reached synchronized boiling point. London's crowd pushed to the very gates of Parliament. Manchester's protesters overran Street, Peter's Square. Birmingham's marchers forced riot police into full retreat. For 19 unbroken minutes, Downing Street was surrounded, not symbolically, but physically by a population that no longer trusted the leaders inside. A population that felt abandoned. A population that believed Keir Starmer had gambled with their safety for political convenience. And in that moment, as the chants echoed against the stone walls of Westminster, Britain changed. Not because of the violence of 24 men, but because of the decision of one man. The collapse did not happen all at once. It happened in layers, one failing after another, each revealing how fragile the system truly was. London was the first to show the crack. At 6:11 p.m., a Metropolitan Police tactical unit attempted to re-establish a defensive cordon near Parliament Street. Within seconds, the line buckled, shields slammed backward, and officers were forced into an uncontrolled retreat. Radios burst into overlapping screams. "Control. We've lost the front. Fall back. Fall back. We have no formation." But there was no safe formation left to fall back to. Britain's security infrastructure wasn't breaking. It was freezing. The very institutions meant to protect the public were paralyzed by the weight of a decision they hadn't made yet now had to answer for. In Manchester, the collapse took a different form. Ambulances queued outside Royal Infirmary, unable to move through gridlock streets as trauma cases multiplied. Fire crews were diverted from 2 burning vehicles to contain a flare-ignited blaze spreading across a bus shelter. One paramedic later described the night. "It wasn't chaos. Chaos has rules. This had none." Birmingham's downfall was psychological. Parents grabbed their children from after-school clubs before dusk. Shops rolled down shutters 3 hours early. Women refused to take the 50 bus route after police admitted they could no longer guarantee patrol coverage. For the first time in decades, entire districts moved with the quiet precision of a city bracing for something bigger, something darker than a protest. The collapse wasn't just on the streets. It seeped into homes, workplaces, and conversations. People no longer asked, "What happened?" They asked a far heavier question. If they released 24 of them, who else have they released? Trust, already fragile, began to disintegrate. Every siren became a warning. Every delayed news briefing became a confirmation. Every government police line's collapse as 3 cities lose control silence became an admission. Because once a country believes its leaders prioritize politics over safety, the unraveling is immediate and unstoppable. Britain wasn't falling apart from violence alone. It was falling apart because millions felt for the first time utterly unprotected. Inside Whitehall, the panic spread faster than the crowds outside by 6:27 p.m. And every secure line in the Home Office was lit with calls. Ministers shouting over advisors, advisors shouting over civil servants, and civil servants whispering in corridors they were no longer certain were safe. No one wanted to be the one who said it aloud, but everyone knew the truth creeping underneath every conversation. The Prime Minister had signed the order and now the country was on fire because of it. In a cramped Situation Room below Downing Street, officials crowded around a circular table stacked with printouts of the leak. The red stamp secret amnesty pilot phase once sat in the middle like a loaded weapon. One minister demanded to know who authorized the downgrading of the detainees' risk profiles. Another snapped back that the profiles themselves were irrelevant. The signature at the bottom is what's killing us. Phones rang without pause. Police chiefs demanded clarity. Regional leaders demanded answers. Journalists demanded statements. But Starmer issued only one instruction repeated 3 times through clenched teeth. Do not acknowledge. A draft statement was prepared. A thin, empty 19-word press release about maintaining public order that mentioned nothing about the detainees, nothing about the leak, and nothing about the explosive truth the public already knew. It was released anyway because paralysis had become policy. Inside the cabinet offices, the atmosphere turned poisonous. Some advisors begged for transparency, insisting that admitting the mistake early might contain the fury. Others warned that revealing the full truth would detonate the government from the inside out. One senior official sent a message that later leaked, "We're not managing a crisis. We're managing a collapse in credibility." Because panic doesn't come from danger alone. It comes from knowing the danger was created by your own hands and seeing no way to undo it. For the first time since taking office, Starmer wasn't shaping the narrative. He was running from it. Away from the chants, away from the smoke, away from the collapsing police lines. Britain's truest wounds were forming in places without cameras. At St. Mary's Hospital, a mother sat beside her son's hospital bed, clutching the jacket he wore when he was stabbed on his way home from school. She didn't ask about politics. She didn't mention Star or the amnesty program. She only whispered one question again and again through trembling hands. If they freed 24 of them, who else will they free next? Across town, parents formed volunteer patrols around playgrounds and school gates, walking in pairs with torches because the police no longer had the manpower to cover evening routes. A teacher in Cuden described watching 3 fathers stand guard outside the entrance to her classroom block. Men who had never spoken to each other before, now united by a single fay. Women changed their habits overnight. Buses after 8 p.m. ran half empty. Rideshare apps surged as people refused to walk home alone. Groups of university students organized WhatsApp networks to make sure no one traveled after dark without checking in first. Shops closed early, not because of vandalism, but because customers stopped coming. Entire streets emptied faster than the winter. The truth: Britain can no longer ignore light faded. And with every shutter that rolled down, the message echoed. Something had broken. Not in the streets, but in the nation's sense of safety. For all the scale of the protests, it was the quiet moments that revealed the true depth of the crisis. The hesitant footsteps, the locked doors, the parents waiting by windows. Not the violence of 24 men, but the fear of millions who realized their government could no longer protect them. When the dust began to settle and the crowds thinned into the night, one truth hovered above every street, every headline, every shaken household across the country. Britain did not erupt because of immigration. Britain erupted because it was lied to. 24 dangerous men walking free was not the catalyst. The catalyst was discovering that their release wasn't an accident, nor a bureaucratic slip, nor a misunderstood policy. It was a decision buried behind locked doors, hidden beneath altered files, and justified with a program that no minister dared defend. For years, people tolerated rising costs, shrinking services, and political spin. But what they would not tolerate, what they could never forgive, was realizing that the government they trusted had gambled with their safety, then tried to bury the evidence under silence and redacted pages. A nation can endure mistakes,